As more and more developing nations, including some of the world's largest economies, decide to ditch the dollar in their bilateral trade.
The world's largest oil producer, Saudi Arabia, is reportedly asking to join BRICS.
We should prepare to lose our position as holder of the world's reserve currency.
For all of our lives, the dollar has been the king of currencies around the world. But is that about to change?
The United States of America is a country that has become a world leader in many aspects, including its economy, military, technology, and culture. One of the reasons for this is the power of the US dollar, which has become the global currency of choice. For almost a century, the US has been the world's most dominant country and the US dollar the most dominant currency. The sheer dominance of the US dollar can be understood by the fact that almost 60% of the world's foreign exchange reserves are in US dollars. But in recent years, the dominance of the US dollar has been challenged by various factors. The rise of new economic powers such as China and India, the increasing use of cryptocurrencies, and the instability of the US economy and politics have put the status of the US dollar as the world reserve currency at risk. In this video, we will discuss the present time, which many are considering as a once-in-a-millennium time. We will also try to explore the reasons behind the decline of the US dollar's dominance and the possible alternatives that might replace it. The number one thing we need to know is what is a world reserve currency and how did the US dollar become one. A world reserve currency provides a range of benefits for the global economy and financial system by facilitating trade, promoting financial integration, and providing liquidity and stability to financial markets. For example, you are a farmer who grows wheat and wants to sell it to a foreign country, but you do not know what is the actual value of that country's currency. What solution do you have? Well, one solution is to sell wheat in exchange for a commodity like it was done in the olden days, in exchange for gold or silver. That's where the Bretton Woods Agreement comes in. After World War II, the US emerged as the only major industrialized country that had not been significantly damaged by the war. This gave the US a significant advantage in terms of economic power, as it was able to produce goods and services that were high in demand globally. The US dollar became the world reserve currency following World War II due to a combination of factors such as economic, political, military, and most importantly, the Bretton Woods Agreement. In 1944, representatives from 44 countries met in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, to establish a new international monetary system. This resulted in the creation of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. The agreement established a new global financial system aimed at promoting international trade and economic stability after World War II. Under the Bretton Woods Agreement, the value of the US dollar was fixed to gold, and other countries' currency were fixed to the US dollar. This meant that the US dollar became the world's reserve currency, and other countries could exchange their dollars for gold at a fixed rate of $35 per ounce of gold. The system was known as the gold standard. This agreement was one of the most stable monetary agreements in the world ever, and was accepted by the whole world. The Bretton Woods Agreement tied the majority of the world's currencies to the US dollar, and the US dollar became extremely powerful. Everything was running smoothly, and foreign countries began to exchange their US dollars for gold, but it slowly started to put pressure on the US gold reserves and increase inflation and trade deficits in the United States. To cope up with that, in 1971, President Nixon announced the Nixon shock.
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets,
which was the announcement that ended the convertibility of the US dollar to gold and effectively ended the Bretton Woods Agreement. This allowed the US to print more money to finance its debt without worrying about its value in relation to gold or other currencies. The termination of the Bretton Woods Agreement meant that other countries were also free to turn to any other exchange, which could indirectly create a new world reserve currency. But the countries didn't move away from the US dollar, or we can say they just couldn't. In order to maintain the US dollar's status as the world reserve currency and ensure demand for US dollars in international trade, the US government needed to ensure that other countries continued to use and hold US dollars. This is where Saudi Arabia and the petrodollar system come in. In 1945, President Franklin Roosevelt secretly flew to Saudi Arabia with an offer Saudi Arabia couldn't refuse.
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
The US proposed Saudi Arabia that the kingdom would sell its oil exclusively in US dollars, and in exchange, the US would provide security and economic support to Saudi Arabia. Both the countries signed the agreement. This agreement formed the basis of the petrodollar system, which ensured that other countries would also need to hold US dollars in order to purchase oil from Saudi Arabia. This agreement with Saudi Arabia was subsequently extended to other oil-producing countries. This has given the US government significant influence over global financial markets and has helped to maintain the dominance of the US dollar as the world's reserve currency till today. For decades, the US has used its dominance to cut countries from its energy supply list in different ways, such as economic sanctions, using its influence over the World Bank and the IMF to deny countries access to loans, restrictions on trade and investment, as well as asset freezes and travel bans. But sometimes, the countries that can produce their own energy rebel. In such a situation, the US does not hesitate to use military force. The US has historically used military force to secure access to energy resources, such as in the Gulf War in 1991, which was fought in part to protect access to oil reserves in Kuwait. The US has also used military force to overthrow governments that it sees as a threat to its interests, such as in Iraq in 2003, after Saddam Hussein proposed to stop using US dollar in Iraq's oil exports and instead switch to a different currency, such as the euro or Japanese yen, to receive payment for its oil exports. However, the US government saw Saddam Hussein's proposal as a direct challenge to its economic and political interests. As a result, the US government responded by imposing sanctions on Iraq and eventually invaded Iraq in 2003, citing concern about weapons of mass destruction. In the end, Saddam Hussein's proposal to stop using US dollars in Iraq's oil export was not implemented, and the US dollar still remains the dominant currency in the global oil market. But this is 2023, and this time, the US dollar may be at the end of its dominance, and there are several factors working behind it. The most important one is that the country which played a major role in making the US dollar a dominant currency in the global oil markets is now playing a major role in ending its dominance. Yes, I am talking about Saudi Arabia. The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, has recently told his associates that he is no longer interested in pleasing the US. Saudi Arabia's finance minister recently said that the oil-rich nation is open to trading in currencies beside the US dollar for the first time in 48 years. Well, it's not just Saudi Arabia that's giving the US nightmares. Many big economies are ditching the US dollar. In March, India inked an agreement with 18 nations to trade in Indian rupees. Brazil and China recently reached an agreement to completely ditch the US dollar and settle their trade in Chinese yuan. The most sanctioned country in the world, Russia, has ditched the US dollar like never before and is working to launch a joint BRICS currency. China is working to pitch yuan as the new world reserve currency by promoting it in the BRICS, SCO, and OPEC. Not just the big economies, even small African countries like Ghana and Kenya asked their citizens to get rid of the US dollar and announced that they are planning to start buying oil using gold instead of US dollars. If you think the shift is accidental, you are absolutely wrong. The resentment against the US was building up for a long time, which became firm after the Russia-Ukraine war began, as the Western governments froze $300 billion of Russia's foreign currency reserves and proposed to use the money to rebuild Ukraine. This sent a red flag to all the countries out there and showed them how dangerous it can be for them to be completely dependent on the US and the US dollar. Even after all these factors working against the US, there are several reasons why it would be difficult to replace the US dollar as the world reserve currency. The US dollar is widely used in financial markets, which in turn strengthens the currency's status as a reserve currency. The US dollar has been the world's dominant currency for decades and has a stable and predictable value. This stability makes it easier for businesses and governments to plan and execute financial transactions. The US has the largest economy in the world and plays a dominant role in global politics. This gives the country significant influence over the international financial system, which in turn strengthens the position of the US dollar as the world reserve currency. While there have been discussions about creating alternative reserve currencies such as the euro or the Chinese yuan, These currencies are not yet widely accepted or stable as the US dollar. Until a viable alternative emerges, it will be difficult to replace the US dollar as the world reserve currency. While it may not be completely replaced as the world reserve currency anytime soon, it's clear that its dominance is being challenged. As new economic powers emerge and the world becomes more interconnected, the global economy may need a new currency system that reflects these changes.